We could repair equipment. We could do that for an hour.
That'd be fun.
Fixing leaks.
I got a leak in my press.
Me too.
Welcome to episode 374 of Beyond the Edge of Night. My guest, Burt Foster. Is that what episode we're on? Or is it 9?
Are you counting?
Episode 10.
Episode 10.
I don't really count, but I like to think that we're deeper in them than we really are.
Maybe they're just taking so long that it just seems like forever. It's like when you ask your wife if you've been married 60 years and she said it's been 20, you know.
Yeah. It's been 20 years since you asked me that. So Burt, when did we first meet? Reno, Nevada.
Yeah, probably. We might have met before then, but I think we hung out in Reno, Nevada in probably 02? 03?
02 or 03, yep.
Yeah, whenever that first year of that
Well,
ABS show.
Because I think that both of us had a bunch of knives that wasn't typical of us to make that kind of knife or that style, but we made them anyway.
I don't think I had a style back then. I did
Yeah.
anything anybody wanted,
Yeah.
and as long as they were paying me, I would do it. I didn't care.
Yeah.
So, but you tried to, you knew you were going to be there with a bunch of people that made nicer knives than you, that were more well known than you. So you were trying to do things you thought people wanted, which is the worst thing you can ever do, because they always just turn out terrible.
Yeah, the worst. That is a good point to make. It reminds me of that part in Cars. Did you see Cars?
The cartoon?
Mhm.
Yes.
You know, when Lightning McQueen goes in and gets his tires, and he goes, I want to get the tires like this. You don't know what you want. I know what you like.
Yeah.
And that's what I always tell people, because my experience is every time I've made a knife for a customer to their specifications, they go, this isn't what I wanted. Oh, no, it's exactly what you wanted. It's exactly what you drew and actually cleaned up your chicken scratch lines and made it look better.
Yeah, people want to believe in experts, and even I tell even guys that haven't been doing this that long. I say, you got to be the expert when somebody's asking you about a knife. You probably still know more than they do, but even if you don't know everything, you got to be able to say, hey, this is what's going to work, because if that's what's going to work out of your shop, it's the way you want to do it. Because if I try to make a knife your way, it's going to look terrible. Vice versa. You got to just do what you got to do.
I like it when they would be like, hey, could you make me a knife like Bob Loveless, because I can't afford a Bob Loveless knife. I was like, yeah, I can make it. What's Bob Loveless get for those knives now? He's passed on, of course, but they sell for like 25 grand. Like, cool, I'll do it for 20 grand.
Yeah.
They don't like it when you say that.
Yeah, I told you, gosh, this has been probably 2 or 3 years ago, when I got a call from a guy. Couldn't even tell you who it is. I probably never talked to him again, but he got a call. He gave me a call, and he said, hey, I really love those laminated type knives that Claudio Sobral makes. And since he's so famous, I can't get one from him. I thought maybe I could get one from you instead.
Yeah, the same Claudio Sobral.
I told Claudio that at the Blade Show the next year, and he got a kick out of that.
Yeah, I told him that the first time I saw my knife on the cover of Blade magazine that they made, I was really mad, but then I appreciated it later on. And he was like, oh, no, you were not upset, were you? I was like, no, I was happy for you. I was just sad for me, because you made it famous, and it was good for them.
Well, it was good for everyone, but you made your thing is you come up with these great ideas, and then you make one of them. And then somebody else takes that idea, and they make 1,000 of them.
Well, yeah.
So.
Well, I'm not 8 or 10 people like they are. That's it. Funny things I always like to hear from new makers. I had a guy in my shop, taught him how to make knives. This is when Adam lived with us. He goes, I'm gonna make some hunters, and this guy was very wealthy, good dude. And he goes, but I'm gonna make some hunters, but I'm not gonna sell them as much as y'all sell them for. I'm gonna make them where people could actually afford them. I'm like, wait a minute. You just showed me a $150,000 shotgun you have, and now what does that mean affordable to you? You know what I mean? Like, what does that mean? And he'd make knives, and every one of them was just unsellable. They were the worst. They were like somebody who goes and does Forged in Fire for the first time makes, you know what I mean? Just, all right, it's pointy, and it has a purple handle. I like that about it. You know, but it was bad. I'm like, I don't know how you're gonna sell these, but selling them, why? Just make them. You know?
I think that's like, you know, trying to make knives and have being affordable be your number one concern is like opening a restaurant and saying, we want to make cheap food. It's going to be awful.
Yeah.
If that's what you want to make, it's going to be awful. If you think you want to make affordable food, but you're going to come up with a way of doing it, that's a little differently, just like knives. If you think, oh, I want to make knives and I want to keep them at, you know, whatever price range you think is good, you can figure that out, but you can't just make them and sell them cheap because they're going to be terrible knives.
Yeah.
You got to start out thinking, and people will always spend more than they think they want to, more than they say they want to, and they'll always be happier.
Yeah.
You get anything you buy in life that's, well, almost anything. There are exceptions.
Yeah.
There are things that disappoint, but.
So one of the things, it wasn't the first year we were at the Reno show. I think it was the second. We had gotten to be pretty good friends. And that was the first year I think Adam DeRosers had showed up there, the Rosiers, and Jimmy Chin. And my experience with Jimmy Chin was from you. And so I go to your table, and he's standing around wearing his silver sunglasses, looking around like he's Bruce Lee, you know. And I'm like, hey, Burt, who's that guy? And you go, oh, you don't know who this guy is? This is a billionaire collector from China. He wants to buy people's knives. I'll send him over to your table. I'm like, okay. So he comes over, and my knife is on the table. I don't even have it in my pocket. Yeah, I got one. So I have a knife on the table. Jimmy's looking at it like this. He's like, what's this? I was like, that's stabilized maple. Mm-hmm. What kind of steel is that? Yeah, that's W2. Oh, W2. Oh. And you pick up another knife. He goes, what is this? And he kept going, and he would just drop them and walk away. And I'm like, and then you say, oh, did he buy anything? I was like, no, he just picked my knives up and dropped them on the table and walked away. He goes, oh yeah, you know, billionaires, they're eccentric like that. And I believed every nonsense you would tell me. You would get me on stuff like that all the time, and I was just like, so now when you tell me things, I'm just like, I don't know if that's real or true.
But
it could be, but I'm not certain that it is.
But the rest of that story is see, I'd met Jimmy probably 3 months before that show. He'd lived about 30 minutes from where I was living in California, and he looked me up he just looked up any knife maker in one of those knives annual directories, calls me up, says he wants to learn how to make knives. So he comes up to the shop, spends a couple days. I charge him a couple $100. He makes a little knife from start to finish, like a little hunter or something. And he gets done and says, well, now what? And I said, I'm done. I'm moving to Virginia. I'm closing my shop. I got to fix the house up. He would come over. One day he came over, and we had like a 3-month escrow on our house in Virginia. So I took the house we were living in and tried to fix it up as much as I could before we sold it. So we're putting granite countertops in the kitchen. I'm putting them in because a friend of mine got these full-size granite slabs for like nothing. And so I'm installing them. And I'm in my garage with a dust mask and an angle grinder with a big stone wheel on it. And I'm grinding the corners of the countertop, dressing them and polishing them and stuff. There's granite dust all over my shop. And Jimmy comes walking in through this cloud of dust, you know. He's like, oh, Burt, what you doing? And I said, well, I'm trying to do this. He says, oh, you're doing great. You're doing it wrong. I used to do this in Taiwan. Yeah. And he says, I show you how to do this. And I'm like, how do I not know you know how to do everything? Yeah. Everything I did, he already knew how to do it. He'd already done it at least once.
But when we moved, older than us, though.
I know.
I didn't realize
but when we moved to
he
Virginia, he says, what do I do from here? Because I was like his teacher. I was the only guy he knew. And I said, well, there's this school in Arkansas. And so he signs up for all the classes, right? Takes every class they offered in 1 year and stays at your house, I think, every single time in between classes, didn't he? He practically lived with you.
And yeah, it was kind of funny.
So he spends like 2 days with me, but probably spent 2 months with you.
He met Adam there and Joan Finch. Joan Finch.
Yeah.
And that was funny. Jimmy.
But he went from being he didn't know which end of the knife was pointy to like 6 months later his knives looked like he'd been making them for 10 years.
Yeah, they were really impressive. He would stay with us, and the kids were really little then. Tiger Lily was little, and we got a bulldog, and he named it Yato, which means little wild girl. and he would take the dogs out on the kayaks and kayak my dog and Duke and the other dog and Adam's dog, Neva. I got a picture of Neva and Duke riding around on the kayak with Jimmy. And then I had a Suzuki Intruder then, I remember. He goes, so you take me for a ride on the motorcycle? I was like, yeah. I was like, okay, let's go. And he goes, no, I ride on the front. It's too dangerous to ride on the back. You ride me on the front? I'm like, no, I'm not riding you like that. He goes, that's how we do it in Taiwan. I was like, that's not how we do it here. I'm not riding you like that. It's not going to happen. I miss him. I haven't seen him in a long time.
It's been probably 3 years since I've seen him.
Yeah, I haven't seen him in a long time.
We was after hammering. We went to a Chinese one of those cheap, all-you-can-eat Asian buffet places in Asheville.
Yeah.
After a hammer-in or somewhere around there, and we sit down, and he's got, I mean, his plate, little. What does he weigh? 130 pounds? I mean, he's just 5 foot nothing, 100.
Yeah.
And his plate was just mounded with food. And he eats the whole plate. He goes back, gets more, eats the whole plate. And I said, oh my God, how do you eat all that? And he says, oh no, he says, Chinese food is very healthy. I said, Chinese food is not healthy. He says, oh yeah, it's very healthy. He says, Chinese people are not fat like Americans. I said, Chinese people are starving to death. I said, that's why they're skinny. Besides, they don't eat this. General Tso's chicken. This is American food. Everything's breaded and battered, deep fried, and coated in sugar sauce. And, oh no, this is very healthy.
There was one of the years he was there, they just opened a Chinese restaurant in my town. So he goes,
hey, where? It's
in Harleyville.
Harleyville?
Yeah. He goes,
really authentic?
He goes, let's go check it out.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay. He goes in there, he goes, yeah, these are country ass people. I'm like, well, how do you know they're country people? He goes, you hear their accent? And I'm like, no, I don't hear their accent.
Not
They're
anymore.
Just speaking Chinese, and you're speaking
the
Chinese too.
Chinese people were country.
Yeah.
I thought he meant people from Harleyville were country ass people.
He said the Chinese people were country ass people.
Okay.
And what was funny was that he goes, oh yeah, they have country accent, like from way in the woods somewhere. He goes, and they're here from the Chinese government to spy on your town. And I was like, keep going. Tell me more. Because this is
the wrong town.
He kept on going on. He goes, oh yeah, all these little places are from the Chinese government. I learned this when I was in the Taiwanese military. We don't like China. And he kept going on about it. I'm like, wow, this could be true. I don't know. But, yeah.
The Chinese government's going to learn a lot of national secrets in Harleyville, South Carolina, though.
Oh boy, there's a lot of Jimmy stories.
There's a lot. There's a lot happening at this one gas station. We don't know why. It could be the only place in town to get something to eat.
Oh God, isn't the other place I took him? So he punched a phone book in half. I saw Jimmy. We held one of them big phone books up, and he punched through it, and it literally exploded. Like I held it, and he
remember how you told me that I tell you things you don't believe? Okay, go ahead. Keep on with your story.
I'm just saying he did.
Just saying.
He had like this golf ball looking thing on his hand right there. So one day, my dad used to work at this cement plant, and he wanted to go up there. He goes, oh, let's go to a gas station, go bullshit with your dad. I was like, okay. So we went up there, get a beer, and there's this big old guy, I don't know who he is. And he goes, points at Jimmy, he goes, hey, who, me? He goes, I don't like you little Chinese bastards. He goes, oh, that's good, because I am Taiwanese. And then the guy starts to say something again. He goes, what kind of beer you like? He goes, Budweiser. So Jimmy brings him back a beer. And the guy goes, well, I don't like you. I want to fight you. And Jimmy goes, oh, that would be impossible. He's just laughing. And I'm like, what's going on? He goes, let me see your big fat hand. And he's talking to the dude like this. And he holds his hand. He squeezes. He goes, nope. So, see, he goes, you see this? And here's that big lump. He goes, oh, that is from punching a sandbag 1,000 times every day. And the guy goes, yeah? He goes, well, I would probably punch a hole right in you. And he got real loud. And the guy jumped back and started drinking his beer. And he goes, so, you like that beer? He goes, yeah. He goes, I don't like Chinese people. He goes, oh, that is good because I am from Taiwan. And then that was it. We were just looking at it the whole time. I was like, this was before the iPhone. I would have been videoing that.
Yeah.
I mean, this would have had
all the things we ever
million views. It was hilarious.
All the things in life we would have actually had on film if we were walking around with cameras in our pockets for all these years.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe it's a good thing.
So one of the things that I think about is when we're making something and you get bored with making that kind of a thing, what do you do to generate a new idea? Or do you just go, I think I'm going to make this crazy idea here? How do you proceed with that?
I kind of bounce back and forth between making stuff I've already made, because, so I kind of have this, years ago, you and I grew up in this era where we were told by the guys that came before us that everything, all these things had value because they were one of a kind.
Oh, yeah.
Right? You had to make one, you could never make it again. And everything that went out on the table, you know, they would say, they would not only say, I've never made this before, but they'll say, I'm never making it again. That was kind of how they sold it. It was all one of a kind. And I had a good friend named Bill North who passed away a couple of years ago. And Bill taught me a lot about just the essence of how to think about the way people buy this kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And he said, people don't want one of a kind stuff. He said, for the most part, they don't want one of a kind stuff. He said, think about, one of the examples we talked about, he says, you know, think about like when you're a teenager and you've got car posters on your wall, you know, Porsche 911s or a Ferrari or whatever. You know, Ferrari made more than one of those. And 30 years or 40 years later, if you wanted to, you grow up, you can go back and buy that car because you're still thinking about that car. You looked at that car for so many years, eventually, if you get enough money, you can go ahead and buy that car. So I believe that it's worth putting the time into designing a knife that you're happy with in advance and then make more than one, because somebody's going to see that knife first time. They won't buy it first time, but they'll maybe buy it the second or third or fourth time you get around to making it. But like you said, I get bored doing that. Yeah. So I go from making 5 or 10, 15, whatever it is, of a certain knife that I've already done in the past, and I'm probably going to do it again. And it's profitable and it's efficient. You figure everything out in advance. You have all your materials lined. I mean, it's just an efficient way to work, but it's very tedious because it's the same thing over and over again. And so usually what I'll do is I'll make some of those and then I'll just walk out and I'll just turn the forge on and I'll just stick something in. I don't even know what I'm going to make, you know, and I make a few of those kind of things, and they're much slower. It takes you a lot, and you're coming up with something while you're, oh, you know what I should do, and then half those things don't work out. Yeah. And so that's kind of how I keep myself, the kind of the happy medium between, yeah, I know people, you know, it makes sense to make this same model over and over again, but you know, right now, I mean, I made some axes. I made several of them. They're all the same, just like the last time I made them, same. Mm-hmm. And then I made some little carry knives. They're all the same. And then I had to make like a Damascus buoy, and then a kukri, and then you know, I mean, I was just making some stuff, just stuck something in there, and I kind of design that kind of stuff like by forging it. I don't know about you, because I know you draw a lot. I draw stuff when I'm working on it, but I don't really draw stuff as concepts. Right. You know what I mean? I just kind of, I work on something and I let it kind of become what I want it to become while I'm working on it. It's sort of like working with clay instead of working to a drawing. I only do that drawing thing when I'm going to like make a model, and I'm going to make a bunch of them.
Right. Well, I'll see something out in nature and it'll inspire me to put those lines into a knife. Yeah. So I'll sketch them out or draw them. One of the things over the years that I've gotten was I don't generally like making knives that I can't figure out or I don't actually have a use for. Does that make sense? Yeah. Like I remember I used to like to make fighters, you know, because they look sleek and awesome. And then when I met people who actually used knives in their work as a weapon tool, none of them looked anything like those. In fact, the ones I was making are too huge. They're fantasy pieces, and I was just like, I don't design a lot of knives. Well, I make all these little, like I like all these little OSS. These are based on stuff from World War II, from the OSS, and I like these. And it's kind of funny, like that I think is pretty handy. I've been carrying around for a month, opening boxes and scribing stuff, and I'm like, you know, yeah, you could poke holes in things with it, but really pretty handy as just a tool, not necessarily I'm cutting with it. I'm just using this pointy part of it. But I make a lot of things that I know, like I like making kitchen knives. I like making, like I'm making a sashimi knife because I don't understand how I know what they do, I know how they work, I know what it looks like when they cut stuff, but I really don't understand their manufacture. And so I'm just exploring it on my own, and I will ask people who've sharpened them, or maybe somebody who made one, and they go, oh yeah, it's like that because of this, and I was like, oh, that's cool, but I don't want someone to actually say, this is how you do it. Now, the mechanics of a knife, like a slip joint or a folder, I'm very interested in someone teaching me that, but I really am not interested in certain other aspects, you know what I mean? Like I want to learn new things. Like I worked with Steve in his shop, and I learned a lot of cool little tricks with Damascus that I never thought about before that I've been using. But like, yeah, a lot of times I'll sketch the knife out, and I might draw it 8 or 10 times and make a prototype and go, oh, I like that. And then I'll make it, and it won't look anything like the prototype I made.
Yeah,
yeah. The way it goes.
I had my mom called me last week, and she said, "Hey," she said, "got a friend here," and he was actually sitting in the room. She said, "Do you have one of those things you put between your fingers and they stick out?" And I said, "What?" And she said, "You know, it's like a thing, and it goes and it sticks out." And I said, "Mom, I have no idea what you're talking about." So she says, "Well, here, talk to Mark." And so Mark starts talking to me. I said, "Are you talking about a push dagger?" He says, yeah, push dagger. He says, "Do you have any of those?" I said, "No." I said, "I've made a few over the years, but no, I don't have anything." I said, he said, "Would you make me one?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Why not?" And I said, "Well," I said, I don't make anything that's, you can't use it for anything but a weapon.
Right.
I just think it's stupid because I'm interested in the utility of it. Now, that knife you could use for 100 things. You could certainly use it as a weapon, and the OSS wasn't thinking about opening cardboard boxes with it. You know, that wasn't what the OSS was designing stuff. Yeah, that's right. 100 Nazi scalps. But I think that's what I'm interested in. But what's funny about it is, I just told him no. I said I don't take orders for anything anymore, and I'm not going to make push daggers. And that night, I'm lying in bed, and I'm thinking of all these little pieces of stag that I have. Like, they're too small for a handle, but I was at some show, and I was like, hey, these are only $10 a piece. And so I bought all these little stupid pieces of stag. I don't know what to do with them. No. And like, I don't make, buckskin leather bags that these would look cool dangling off of. And so I'm picturing making these little stag-handled push daggers. Like, I need to worry about that.
Right.
But you do kind of get these stupid ideas that sometimes seem like a stupid idea, and then sometime later you're like, I don't know, I could try that. But the difference is, you try it on your terms, with your ideas and your materials. If you try it with their ideas and their materials, it'll look terrible. Right. It's not because their ideas are bad. It's almost always just that, well, sometimes their ideas are bad, but sometimes just that they're suggesting something that's not your thing, it's not your style, and the whole time you're working on it, you're not having any fun because you're doing somebody else's knife. It'd be like you or me making a Loveless knife. Yeah. We'd hate it. There's nothing wrong with a Loveless knife. I like them. I just don't want to make them. It's not.
I just don't want to make them.
It's not my thing.
I did. In fact, I'm still working on a chef's knife. It's like I like making. I'll make integrals. I'm enjoying making integrals, and this was a request for a certain Damascus pattern. The raindrop pattern. And I was just like, oh no, man. I made one with W's, and I showed him. He's like, no, I don't really like that one. And I'm like, what? So I was like, I'll make the raindrop. So I made it. And it looks pretty cool, you know. I was like, I'm not gonna say I do it again, and I'm finishing it up now. But it's just the fact that my concern is always like, you have a picture of what a thing looks like. And my picture of what it looks like and their picture is very different. And so when I make it, I always feel like they're going, oh, well, I don't know. But I just say, well, I'm the best there is at doing this. And, no one else is going to do it anywhere near this. And I'm just saying, that's just the way it is.
I think one thing Forged in Fire has done is that there was about a 6-month period, I think in about 1989, where raindrop pattern must have been really cool. And that was about it. Yeah. And there are so many things you can do with a piece of steel that isn't a range. There's just no point to making a range, especially the kind where you're like, you know, drilling or press a little hole. I mean, it's just so dumb. Yeah. It's just such a waste of time. But Forged in Fire like revives these dorky patterns from the past, and then you get calls from people who are like, "Hey, can you make me a raindrop pattern?" Raindrop?
You're gonna take.
Why
this
would
old
you?
plow.
It's like, it feels like asking asking Beethoven if he can like compose you a really kick-ass version of Chopsticks.
Oh,
it's like, why would you do that?
Well,
and I'm not Beethoven, but just seriously, there's so many better things we could do.
The one that sometimes people
raindrop. God, I hate raindrop pattern.
Yeah.
No offense. Yours probably looks great.
It's okay. Well, I don't know how they like. I watched someone do they milled a certain thing on a piece of steel. Might have been Salem Stroud to make a pattern. I'm just like, I never make patterns like that. I just can't tolerate it. Like, even doing ladders.
Listen,
I
that
cut
geometric
ladders
stuff
with
Salem
a
does right now
saw,
is
you know?
beautiful. But I watch it, and you know he'll put a picture up every day, you know, of the progression, and I'm like,
I like
no.
it to go
I liked
crazy.
it. I liked it on day one, and I lost interest after that. It looks better way you did it. I'd have just made something out of that first version and gone with it because 4 days of developing this bar is like, well, nope, my mind is smoked at that point.
I've worked 7,500 hours on this. What do you want for it? $800. I think that's fair. Okay.
Yeah.
Those are like, I had a guy begged me to make him a kukri. He's a knife purveyor. I was like, I made him a kukri. He had it for about 2 years, and then he sold it, and AJ bought it for what I sold it to him for. And then AJ goes, hey, you know, I just sold that kukri that I bought from Larry to a customer of yours and mine from China for $4,800. I'm like, all right. I said, tell Larry.
That's right.
Call him up and say, hey, I just sold
by
that
the way.
kukri for twice what I paid for it.
By the way.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's always funny. What do you think about purveyors?
Great. You know, I think the fact that purveyors are there is great, and I think that they have every right to survive in this market. And I think that, like art dealers, you know, the reason art dealers exist is that most guys who do fine art can't run their business. Right. So they just stand off to the side and they paint, they sculpt, they do whatever they do. And then they have a guy who comes in for 30, 40% and he figures out a way to get it in front of the general public. And I think that there are probably knife makers who need that, whose stuff would never get in front of the general public without a dealer. But I have not sold a knife willingly to a dealer in forever. I mean, 10 years plus. And I've never made a knife for a dealer. So I think that if you are at a knife show, or if you've decided, if you're a knife maker and you've gone crazy, just trying something new, you know, and you've never done it before, and you spent way too much time, 7,500 hours making this complicated whatever, and you've now ended up with something that's whoever your customers are, they just aren't interested. You might need to unload it because maybe you're hungry and you got to buy groceries, and you know you got to do what you got to do. You got to take a 25 or 30% hit on it to get rid of it and get some cash. Fine, but no knife maker should ever make a knife for a dealer. Now there's one exception to this. I just thought about. No knife maker should ever make a knife for a dealer for a discount.
Right.
That makes no sense because. You sell that knife for, you know, you and I, we were talking about this before we started recording, you know, about like how much money we make. You know, people don't realize that there's a lot of expense that goes into what we do. And it isn't just $5 for the steel, $20 for the wood, half a dozen sanding belts. I mean, it's so much more than that.
Oh, yeah.
And so if you give up a knife for 30%, that's it. You might not have even broken even on that knife.
No.
Okay. The one exception is I sold a lot of knives. I mean, probably a few hundred knives, probably 300 knives, 400 knives to Wilson Combat over maybe a 6-year period.
I got you this job.
Yeah, I know you did. I knew you did. But you got Claudio Sobral a job too, in a way.
Of course I did.
And the difference with Wilson Combat was that I designed the knife going in for a price point. It was up to them to mark it up.
That's right.
And we would work together, and Anthony would say, hey, we want to know if we can get such and such a fighter. We want to sell it for this. We're going to pay you this much for it. How much can you do? And I'd say, well, we can't do this. We can't do this. We can do this. And for a while there, I don't do this anymore, but I got this from Dan Winkler. But for a while there, I would take and I would track all of the time spent on a project, on every single step.
Yeah.
I'd get out in the morning, and I'd say, okay, it's this time, and I'd write down what I was doing. I was forging, I was rough grinding, I was every little step. And when I got done working on one of these Wilson Combat projects, and I was tracking stuff, I made more money per hour working on Wilson Combat project that they were selling for less than my retail because I was making a big bunch of them. I wasn't just making one knife. I was one hunter, then one Bowie, then one kitchen knife, then back. Yeah, and everything got so, and it's really boring, right? So it's all, but if you're, and the reason I don't sell knives to Wilson Combat anymore is because I can now sell the knife. If I make 10 Bowie knives that are all exactly the same, back then I didn't have enough customers get rid of 10 Bowie knives all at once. Right. Now I do. Yeah. And so I can make those, still have a process, still be efficient, but now I don't have to discount them to get rid of them. That's right. And so that's the only place, if a dealer contacts me and they say, hey, I'm interested in buying some knives from you, I would say the only, what we can do is we can work on a particular knife and you've got to buy at least 10. Yeah. To which they all say, oh, I'm not interested. You go for it.
That's what George Heron used to do. He would not give anyone a discount. And his knives were gorgeous. Yeah. And they'd sell them they'd buy them from him, and they'd sell them for more. You can buy them at retail because if you're doing it smart, you should always be leaving money on the table. I saw this at Blade one year. Ernie Emerson had a table, and he had, God, this was years ago. He had people lined up like 3 or 4 deep from that table, and then he had like little drop boxes in front of all these knives, right? So you put your name on the paper, drop it in the box, and so at a certain time he goes over, he pulls the name out. You don't win the knife, you just got the opportunity to buy the knife, right? Yeah. So he's got these little folders, $1,500, whatever they are. So pulls out a guy's name, Jason's get it. Jason's so excited. Jason comes up, writes him a $1,500 check, hands it to him, he hands him the knife. You're at the table, Jason turns around, and the guy behind him goes, I'll give you $1,800 for it. Yeah. And he goes, all right. And he sells it, and before that guy leaves, somebody's offered him 22. Yeah. And so and why Ernie was so smart, Ernie knew he could have got 22 or 25 for that knife, but you know what? He wouldn't have had the crowd around his table. And if you can sell knives for less than they're worth, then a collector should be able, a dealer should be able to buy them. That's right. And mark them up because he knows it's worth more. Yeah, that's their job. I guess we call it the secondary market. Like, what do knives sell after you sell them? I watch it, and I think it's interesting to see, like I was telling you about that one, but if somebody calls up and orders, well, I'm not going to take an order, but if I make another kukri like that, I'll sell it for $2,500. Now, if somebody wants to buy it and sell it for $45, cool. Right. I don't care. Right. I'm never touching that market. I don't want to touch that market. Like you said, unwillingly. I didn't know. I sold a chef's knife to a guy who sells kitchen knives. I didn't know that about him. I started following him, and it was fine. He didn't try to get a discount or anything. Well, I wouldn't have given it, but he liked it, and it was just a weird one-off piece. It was like it was supposed to be an integral, and I ended up screwing it up. So I just made it big because I got the old school W2, and I was like, I'll just make a big kind of a cleaver chopper. So it was like a 3-inch wide, 10-inch long thing. It was heavy, but it was good in the kitchen, I thought. So I finished it artistically. Yeah. Did some faceted handle. He loved it, and I think he sold it to somebody else and made money. Good for him. Yeah. Now, sometimes I will write your name down. I will not sell you another knife if I find out. Well, but sometimes I don't care. Yeah. It all depends. And listen, and you and I both know people who they were just making a $600 hunting knife. And back in the day when, nowadays, your stock goes up because your social media presence goes up. Then now there's TV shows, there's stuff like this. But
back in the day, it was all like magazines and shows and things like that. So you'd get a cover of a magazine, right? And all of a sudden, your $600 knife, now people want them. So now you charge $1,000 and you charge $2,000. What these guys would do is they would just keep going. And what they were doing was they were, as you put it, they were kind of tapping into that secondary market. That was kind of like the second tier of the pricing. They realized they could go there, so they did. So they had a $600 knife, and a couple of years later, these guys were getting $4,000 for these knives. And then what happened was the last man on earth who wanted to spend $4,000 for a $600, the knives had not gotten any better, you know. The last guy bought that knife for $4,000, and the phone stopped ringing.
Yep.
And this guy's sitting around, and I've seen this happen, you've seen this happen to so many different people, and all of a sudden they're sitting there thinking, well, I got one of two choices. I was making money at $600, but if I go back, I will destroy everybody who's bought a knife from me for more than that. Right? You'll never get anybody who buys a knife from you after that. Yeah. That is already no repeat business. Basically, burn all your old customers, or I quit.
Yeah.
And I go make anything else. I got to go to another industry where they don't know me, and that is a dangerous thing.
Dangerous thing.
I mean, the one curse of success in this business is when your stuff is actually worth something and people want it, not giving in to that temptation to just keep charging more. Yeah. Just keeping that price at something, and it's weird. It's weird. Too, yeah, you can price yourself, because a guy will say, I remember a guy told me, he says, you know this guy, but I won't mention anybody by name. He says, yeah, I'm now selling my feather pattern bowie for $3,500. And I say, oh, really? Like, what do you mean? And he's like, well, I had one at the show, and a guy paid me $3,500, and so he said, that's what I'm going to sell them for now. Well, that might be the only guy who wanted to pay that much for that knife. You know, you can't just price your stuff based on one knucklehead.
Yeah, when I was in Reno, it was one of those years. I had two knives. They had, did this black finish on a blade. It was like 2002 or, no, it was 2004. And they had black guards in it. And I thought the handle material was stabilized red, but it wasn't. It was pink. I was like, I'm not going to sell these knives. No one's going to buy these knives. Two pink-handled knives. No one's going to buy these knives. This guy comes up, and he goes, oh, man, those are gorgeous. How much is that one and that one? I go, well, that one's $7,000 and that one's $4,000. He started to give me $7,000. And then he started to give me $4,000. And I was like, whoa, wait, $700, $400. And he's like, oh, okay. He took his money back. He bought them. He was disappointed.
Yep.
I went and told Schwarzer, and he smacked me upside the head. He says, if he wants to pay you that much, you let him pay that much. I was like, yeah. But right there, that would have been the place where somebody goes, well, I get $7,000 for this knife.
That's right.
Like, yeah, man, you know what? I like doing this. George Heron told me a long time ago. He goes, you can always keep going up.
Don't ever.
Sometimes you can never go back.
You can't ever come down.
So you don't want to go. You don't want to get yourself in a predicament where, you know, some of these guys. I hear them. You know, I like to call them the whisperers. You know, like sit around and talk like this and wear cowboy hats. They're not too friendly. They got a little clique group and they make Bowie knives. And they tell me about how much they get for, or what they design. I was like, you didn't design anything. You're making Bowie knives. You ain't making, you know, ain't nothing special about that. I'm not, maybe there is something special about it, but.
There's a market for everything. People buy, you know, lots of dumb stuff.
People buy bronze watches. Burt.
They do. People do buy bronze, and they know they're going to turn funky colors, and they buy them anyways.
I want one.
But, you know, Bob Lovelace told me, and this is generic, but I feel like I tell everybody this. I was at a Blade Show West when it was still in Southern California, and it was like the first year I was making knives full time, and Bob was he came to the show and he wasn't exhibiting or anything. Nobody knew he was going to be there. He just kind of showed up unannounced, and he's just walking around the room, and he came by my table, and he's just stopping at everybody's table. He's not talking a lot. He's just looking at the knives and stuff. Kind of walks on. And when I was 16, I read his book, How to Make Knives. So he stops in front of my table, and I stuck my hand out, and I said, hey, Bob, I said, I'm Burt Foster. I said, I just wanted to say that I read your book when I was 16 years old. It's kind of what got me into this biz, you know, thing. And I stopped before I said business because I wasn't making any money, and it felt so hypocritical calling it a business. And he leaned over and he goes like this, and he said, "Let me tell you something, son." He said, "It's not hard to make a knife, and it's not that hard to make a great knife, but it's hard as hell to make a living at it."
Yeah.
And then he walked away, and I'm like, there you go.
There you go.
Knife business 101, you know?
Yeah.
That's it.
That's what I think is funny.
Blazing that on the back wall of my shop, and just everybody says, "Oh, I want to." I'll tell you another funny me and you story. So I had this guy call me up and say that he says, I got a 5-year plan. I want to know if I can come take a class. I don't remember what he was asking me, but he never made a knife. But he said, I have a 5-year plan to be a mastersmith because that's where all the money's at.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, so I got off the phone and I called you up and I said, "Oh God, you'll never believe what just happened." I said, "This guy just called me and he's like talking about being a mastersmith and where's the money at?" And you're like, "Yeah, okay. Hey, I gotta go." And I said, "All right." Hung up. My phone rings 5 minutes later. I pick it up and you said, "Hey, what's been going on?" I said, "Well, nothing. Why?" And you said, "I don't know." I said, "Hey man, I had the weirdest dream I was going to tell you about." And I said, "What?" And you said, "I had this dream that you called me and you were talking about this guy and he said we could make money at Mastersmith." And I said, "Are you kidding me?" He said, "No, why?" He said, "Was that not a dream?" I said, "I just called you 5 minutes ago and told you that." And you said, "You did?" And I said, "Oh, geez, Jason." I said, "Where are you?" You said, "I'm driving to Charleston." I said, "Oh, crap." I said, "You pull off the road and get an apple juice, man." I said, "It's bad." You called me 15 minutes later. You're like, "I'm fine."
Yeah.
"I'm fine. It's okay."
That's always funny.
But yeah, people always think, they see these knives, especially, and I remember thinking it as a new knife maker. And I know guys look at us, and I still don't feel like an old knife maker, even though I've been doing this like more than half my life at this point.
Well,
But
yeah, you
I
are.
had a guy. You see these guys, and they're charging at the beginning it's hundreds of dollars, and then you see thousands of dollars, and you think, "Oh my gosh, these guys are making so much money. Look how expensive their knives are," and you have no idea how much time it took a guy to make these knives. Not only how many years it might have taken, but sometimes they got so much time in them. I was in a Chuck from Alpha Knife Supply.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Chuck baby.
Chuck was at the Reno show one year, and we didn't allow vendors at the show. It was just so he rented a room at the hotel, and he had all this stuff spread out all over his bedspread. Do you remember that when he used to come and do that?
I remember that.
And so you go up into his room, and he had all this like handle material, and he had ivory and wood, and I can't remember what else he brought with him, but he had a couple of suitcases full of stuff. And there's a guy there who's a mastersmith, and he was looking at some ivory, and I'm looking at some wood or whatever. I didn't buy it. I still don't use a lot of expensive handle materials, a lot of wood.
Yeah.
So I've got some wood here that I've piled up. I'm going to buy this stuff. And this guy who was kind of like legendary knife maker, made ridiculously nice stuff. He's looking at some ivory and stuff, and he puts it down. And he says, "No, I better not right now." And Chuck said, "No, do you need me to, like, I know you're good for it if you want it." And he goes, "No, I better not." He said, I've just been working on this one knife for 6 months longer than I had planned on it." And I said, "You've been working on the same knife for 6 months?" He said, No, I've been working on it 6 months longer than I thought." He said, "I thought it was going to take me 3 months."
Is that Rick Eaton?
Well, you're not supposed to say people's names. No, it's not
I
Rick.
remember
It's
Rick
not
talking
Rick.
about it.
Whoever it might be, it's not Rick Eaton.
It was incredible. It was the craziest thing I ever saw.
But this person who's not Rick, whose name does not rhyme with Schmick Schmeaton, he would do this stuff that I wouldn't even know where to start.
Yeah.
But not only that was his work, and he liked doing that work, right? And I didn't, that's the first distinction. But the other thing is, you can't look at any one guy and say, this guy's charging 50 grand for a knife. He's making a lot of money. He might have worked on that knife for 2 years.
2 years, yeah.
You know?
That's right.
And you see some other guy who's got some $100, water jetted, bead blasted, whatever. Guy might be making a killing. You just can't judge by those knife prices what anybody's making, and so you got to just make what you're going to make.
You make what you
try to find the best way to do it. Try to not starve to death.
I agree with that.
And don't think you're going to get rich being a knife maker.
No. Well, I think that's a funny word, business, because there's another character that you and I know. I'm not going to say his name.
His name rhymes with.
He said.
Oh, you're not even going to go there?
No, but I'll tell you what he said. And like, he said,
can we be off?
He
Can we
said
off the
something
record?
about his knife business, and I'm like, you don't have a knife business. He goes, yeah, I do. I go, no, you don't have a knife business. Yeah, I do. I'm like, well, where's your shop? Right here. I go, yeah, that's not your shop. Now, what's the next part? Can I buy your business and you show me how to run it, and then I could purchase your business and you just consult me for a couple of months? No. I said, then it's not a business. And that's the real thing. Probably one of the reasons I got into designing knives and doing collaborations with some other people like the Winklers is because they have a knife business. And Daniel is an efficiency expert. Like, Daniel will figure out the most efficient way to clamp a handle, you know, and he's got like pneumatic clamps in there now. Like, you put the pins in, it goes, I mean, it's really clever, you know what I mean? And even like, he'll research the glues, like this glue works better, this one's the strongest, this is the most, you know, like, efficiency is like boom. And he's brilliant when it comes to that kind of stuff. But even before they had a knife factory, he could make knives like fast, man. And I was like, whoa, I had no clue how quick he could do it. But I was like, man, they're going to these shows. And then the more, I mean, I've known him since I was 15, but the more I got to know Daniel, and like, we made a knife in my shop one time for this Team 5 Foundation guys. And I made my knife and I dinked around it, and Daniel was like, oh yeah, that's nice. Boop, 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 boop. And it was done. I was like, what? How did you do that so fast? It was just, he figured out ways to make it very efficient, which helps me think about things in a way. But he has a business as a knife maker, you know? And that's a cool thing. And that's something that I would like to also have, a knife business where I have designs, I have a manufacturing process, I have a way that I could, you know, it's going, and I'm like, let's, you know, there's marketing and distribution and everything set up. I like that, but I still like to make my knives. Now, one of the weird things is I really want to just be able to make my knives and not sell them. Like, I like to give them away to people I want to give them away to, or keep them, you know what I mean? Just make these crazy pieces. I'm sure I'll sell them.
You mean the
anyway,
one-off stuff?
The one-off stuff.
You mean you like to not have to sell all your one-off stuff?
Yeah, but you know, there's another funny thing too, and you meet these guys. So no one knows how we make knives. But you know what's funny? People who don't forge think that we're just forging to, I guess, total finish or something. I'm not really sure. Because they go, well, I don't make knives like you. I don't do all that beating and bending. I grind them. I'm like, oh, I grind them too. Yeah. Oh, well, I was like, I grind them. I've 5-axis CNC mill them. I 3-axis mill them. I have somebody else mill them. I make them, I stock them, you know, everything you can. I water jet them, and they go, oh, it's kind of funny. Well, I was like, I hollow grind them, I mirror polish them, whatever I got to do to make what I want, that I make it. And it's always interesting because there are makers I've met who, you know, everybody thinks their way is the best way. I don't think my way is the best way.
Well, it's not.
It's not. But what I do, what I will do is I will find the most direct route to make the specific thing I'm making. Like, if I do a Brute de Forge piece and I want to share that with people, I want to find the most direct route to share with people, because, I mean, you probably had people come in your shop and they're making a thing and they're going like, we can go right here, but they're going like, well, I'm going to go there. Let me show you. I was like, where the hell are you going with this? Where are you going with this idea? And they come back, now they're here. I was like, we could have already been over there. What did you do all that nonsense for? Or just stuff. So I tend to just cut that off. I said, you can do that if you want to, but it doesn't make sense.
Yeah. You know, you got to make knives to your strengths. And I tell people all the time, you know, when I'm teaching classes and stuff, and I work my way through and I explain how I'm going to do this and how I'm going to do this and how, you know, when we were talking about forging, let's say, and I tell people all the time, I say, you know, if you watch Jason Knight forge a knife, I said, I cannot forge a knife the way you do it. I can't. I just can't do it. If you and I were to both pick up, we were both allowed to choose one hammer, the hammer you would choose is a hammer I cannot use. I cannot use one of those friggin' rounding hammers to make anything. And you can make anything with one. And your path, your way of doing it, it's like you're hammering here, there, and everywhere, and then you're done, and you've got this perfect knife that you've made. Now, I can make a knife, but I can't do it your way. I have to do it my way because my brain works different than yours, and you couldn't do it my way. And so everybody's got their own, like their background and their strengths, and you don't even know this coming in. I mean, if you're just a guy and you start making knives, you don't know what you're good at most of the time. You know, I mean, I started doing this so young. I don't really have any other, I didn't come from like a machining background or a blacksmithing. I didn't come from any of that.
I came from a knuckle dragging Cro-Magnon background.
I just was a kid who didn't know what he wanted to do for a living and, you know, just did stuff. But I did come through, you know, I do have certain strengths that I brought with me that I didn't realize were strengths sometimes until you get into it and you realize, oh, you know, understanding photography is pretty good, especially now that we're in a, you know, pretty digital era. Now, of course, as smart as iPhones have gotten, you don't really need to know how to take a picture anymore. But it still kind of helps to have a, you know, so whatever you're good at, you got to be good at. And some of these guys, they came from factory design backgrounds. I mean, they were mechanical engineers. They've worked with, they can run, you know, CAD programs. They can design stuff that way. And that's how they make their knives. And then other guys that come from other backgrounds do it a different way. So I think that finding not only your style, but kind of the, you know, what makes you you and bringing that to the thing, then you can make some money at it. But you can't make knives like me and try to make money, and I can't try to make knives like George Heron or Bob Loveless and make money, or Dan Winkler or anybody else. You got to sort of steal the little bits and pieces that you can incorporate, but you got to kind of go with one cohesive product. I get emails all the time. A guy emailed me the other day and he's like, how, I want to make a hamon. What kind of oil should I quench this blade in? And I was like, I don't know where to start. I can't answer that question. I don't know what kind of steel you're using, what kind of temperature it is, or nothing. Nothing. I don't know anything. It's not even, it's like asking a baker, how hot do you bake something?
Yeah, what are you baking?
What are you baking? Right. I mean, it's, you know.
I always tell them to get, it's funny because everybody wants some super, like, oh, I will get that W2, do a hamon. Like, no, get 1045, put clay on it, and quench it in water. It'll look gorgeous. You'll have a good time doing it. It'll be exactly what you want. And it will. It won't even break it. I mean, you don't even have to temper it.
I say buy one 10X steel that's not 1084.
Use the same one over and over.
Don't use anything but that, and don't change anything unless you're changing it for improvement. Keep lots of notes, and eventually you'll figure it out.
Yeah, one of the things that I stress to people all the time is, I remember back in the, I don't know who was telling me this, someone who still, I'm going to say is, you know, they're experienced with time, but they're not experienced with knives. They were telling me, well, I use this steel for this kind of knife, and this steel for this kind of knife, and this steel for this. And I was like, you know, you could use the same steel for all those kinds of knives, and you'd be really good with that steel. And that's what I do, and that's what I teach people to do and think about or whatever. Or like, you know, we get on these idealistic planes of, oh, this is the most, the best Damascus mix because it's a high performance, whatever. I was like, is it? I mean, like, what does that mean? It's like shooting a rifle that's half MOA at 100 yards. Yeah, can you shoot that? Well, probably not, but there it is anyway. So
what's this made out of?
I don't know. Some European steel, some 1, 2, 3, 4 steel, but it works good. I haven't broken it yet.
CO. Yeah, I don't know what that is.
Good stuff.
So, but you know, whoever, you know, when they make this, they've got to take into account its machinability, and they got to take into account the stuff it, you know, won't ever do, and the stuff it can tolerate, and how it's going to deal with the finish and everything that they do. And there's so many things put on, and most people, when they're talking about it, they think that all you have to do is worry about like edge holding or strength. There's just so many more things. What if it's the greatest steel? You know, W2, for instance, I was on a W2 band. I mean, I like it still, but I was on a W2 bandwagon for a long time, right about the time that they weren't making it anymore.
They couldn't get it anymore.
And so I bought a bunch of it, I still have some of that stuff I bought. But if I'd have continued making knives out of nothing but W2, I'd have ran out years ago.
Yeah.
Well, then what am I going to do?
Right.
Then I got to try to find something else. So is W2 the best? Well, if you can't get it, it's not the best.
Right.
What about something that you can get and it's always the same? Well, and it's good for this, but guess what? It's also good for this.
Yeah.
I don't know how, I know you do the same thing, but I mean, I'll forge knives because I'm just in that mood, and then I won't finish that knife and it sits up on that thing. Well, guess what? In a few years, I don't know what that is. If I could get myself to the point where I was only making everything out of one steel, I'd have a pile of knives, and 2 or 3 years later, I'd be like, I still know what that is. Because guess what? I haven't been using anything but this for years. 80 Serra V2. I'm making so much more stuff out of that than I ever did with anything else, because I can make a chef's knife out of it, and I can make a big heavy chopping knife out of it. You can make a sword out of it if you wanted to.
Yeah. I think it's good for everything.
It's going to be fine. But guess what? It's not. It doesn't claim to be excellent at anything, and that's okay. And I fully admit that. You're going to sharpen anything.
Yeah.
I mean, everything is going to need to get sharp. Nothing's going to never get dull.
I'm not an idealistic steel or knife. You know, like, I don't believe in that. You know what I think people do to me sometimes about design? You know, there's one design that I loathe. And I think people that are my friends tell other people, so I get a really weird name will come in and
Coffin handle buoys?
No, I don't make those.
The
gut hook.
But you
the
love
gut
those.
hook.
Oh God, yeah.
And everybody knows I dislike this knife. You know, that's the pot hook. That's for grabbing your coffee pot off the fire to set it out when you're camping. But someone with a really strange name was like, "That's a made-up name. That's a made-up name." And they sent me a picture of a knife. I've been asking every master bladesmith, and no one will make me this knife. And I'm just like, nice try, Adam DeRosiers. I don't know how you made up this fake account.
I made a fake email account and sent it to you over and over again from different accounts.
That's always funny. So right now, what is you're working on right now that you are most pleased with?
You know, I just finished a bunch of knives, so I don't even know what I'm doing next. I'm kind of in sheath mode at the moment, so I'm just kind of finding ways to dress up the knives I've already got. But I'm doing a lot more like random pattern Damascus than I have done in a long time.
Yeah.
And I'm doing more, and it's not just because it's efficient or it's fast or it doesn't take as much time as, you know, this hyper geometric mosaic stuff, which it is faster. But a lot of times I just find it more interesting because it's not, it looks like it's alive. You know, It looks like a piece of wood. It looks like something that kind of came out of nature, and there's that element of the unknown, you know, and it's stupid stuff. It's not. I'm not innovating. I'm not doing anything like that. It's just I'm making the same kind of stuff, but there's the element of I wonder what this is going to look like when I grind into it. I kind of know what it's going to look like,
right.
But every one is going to look a little different. I kind of like that.
It's like a thumbprint.
Yeah, and I feel like sometimes, you know, there's knives that I look at. My big, you like to pick on gut hooks. I love to pick on mosaic pins because I don't
like those.
It's a design element for people who don't know what to do, and so you're just going to put it on. It's like putting sprinkles on a donut or something.
Yeah,
they don't add anything to it. They just make it look more gaudy, but they don't have any flavor. And so, you know, some of these elements are like, and you know where I first saw this was when you and I were kind of first coming up. There were all these, you know, stock removal guys and forging guys were two completely separate camps. We didn't hardly talk to one another, right? But the stock removal guys, they would buy their stainless Damascus from these, you know, Devin Thomas, guys like that back in the day. And Devin had 20 different patterns, right? And he always made these same 20 patterns. It was never adding new stuff or not getting, it was always the same year after year after year. It was all spirograph and raindrop and whatever. And you'd have some guy with a folding knife, and he'd have a folding knife with a blade made out of raindrop and a bolster made out of spirograph and a back bolster made out of, and he thought he was adding to it, you know? And it just is you're just, blech, you know, it's just too much. And so more and more, I just think that taking and just making everything simpler.
Yeah.
And I'll make knives that I feel like I crossed the line just because I used a piece of handle material that was colored instead of black.
Right.
You know, because it's like I already had too much. And I feel like I get to too much a lot quicker than I used to. I made stuff back in the day that was way more, that I'd never make today. And so I feel like I'm making simpler and simpler elements. I'm trying to make them look better.
Right. I agree with
But
that.
and it's
Yeah.
sort of partly it's a challenge to me. Like, can you make the way I always say is I say anybody can cook a filet mignon and it'll taste good, but a great chef can take oxtail soup and make it taste great.
Right.
Because it's basically garbage.
Yeah.
And so using like kind of throwaway stuff, not necessarily blade material, although I do use some recycled stuff, but very little. But handle material, yeah, just simple.
Well, I went through that.
I'm not using $100 ironwood for every handle.
Right.
You know?
I don't even. Yeah. So I went through that. 2012, 13. We were really broke. I mean, the economy was bad. People were buying some knives, but I met a guy and he was making these knives. They were $100 a piece. And they were real frontiersy, but he would bring 100 of them to a gun show. And he would leave with no knives. And I think that equals up to 10 grand, doesn't it? To a gun show. And that was every other
2 months,
every other month. And I'm like, this guy is way smarter as a knife maker than I am. So what I would do is I'd like, how long does it take me to make I would design a little knife and I'd be like, I'm going to make this in this amount of time. Boom, 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 boom. And I already remember a couple years ago we would play this game like, what can we make in so many hours?
Yeah.
All right, so I would do that, and then I was like, man, I can make 10 of those. So I made 10 of them, and I didn't have any steel. All I had literally was, I had all these sheets of 15 and 20. They were like 80 thousandths, and I told Tristan, I said, design something you can get 2 knives out of that, like a paring knife. So he did. He came up with this knife. They lay like that. We cut them all up. We made like 20 of them. Sold them for $100 a piece. And I did 2 kinds of handles. One was smooth, and one was just a faceted. The faceted one was always more popular, always were. And I remember being criticized by some of these, you know, I don't personally care for some of these people because it was a hard time and they should have been in a position of encouragement, but they weren't. They were disparaging, and it kind of bothered me about it because not only were they doing that, they were also knocking my knives. And I'm like, they're razor sharp, they look cool. I sold every single one of them. Every time I did those little things, every single one of them.
And you will never get knocked by a guy. If anybody ever knocks you for doing that kind of work, as long as you're making a good quality knife, it's not like you're making tacky junk. As long as it's a good knife, you'll never get knocked by a guy who has to pay his bills making knives.
Right.
Never. The only people who will ever criticize you is people who make knives as a glorified hobby on the tail end of a career that made their living for them, or on the tail end of a wife that made their living for them.
That's
and that is
exactly
it.
right.
Anybody who's ever actually had to pay their bills, the reason Dan Winkler
Yeah.
is a smart efficiency guy and drove mainstream ABS guys crazy for years, was he had to pay his bills making knives.
That's right.
He wasn't just making, he wasn't making all his money or living on the back end of a military retirement or some other thing, corporate retirement.
Yeah.
And you and I have been making our living, paying our light bills, buying our groceries with the money that's left after we've bought new steel and bought belts and bought grinders and bought everything else. And so I never looked down on a guy who's making $100 knife.
Me neither. It always fascinated me. And then AJ, he asked me one day, it was a couple years later, he goes, can you make an all steel knife with like forged texture for like the dark side stuff for $100? I go, oh heck yeah, I could do those today. Like I made 10 of them a day for like 8 days in a row. That was $8,000.
Yep.
I mean, like, it's a no-brainer. And it's just always funny when you think about these different things. Now what I do, I make what I want to make. And I only make what I want to make. And sometimes I challenge myself with like a crazy piece, but that crazy piece will be, like, one of my favorite things that I did was doing a blacked out finished kukri with black micarta handles and a black bolster and selling it for $3,000 because nobody everybody was, Damascus and ivory and engraving. And I was just like, boom. It was just like the whole, that's why everything's, everybody wants a satin black car motorcycle now. I invented that. I'm just kidding.
Appreciate that.
but that's the fun part,
It
is to
is.
take those lines and take simple things.
Yes.
And then you just kill it, and it's just like, whoa.
Yeah.
Or curly maple and a piece of steel, kill it. Those are way more fun knives. You do them, I do them. I love doing those things. When I buy ironwood, I don't buy the fancy ironwood. Just send me the.
Yep.
I just did that knife. It's got crazy Damascus. It's like I put a pretty blah piece of ironwood on it, and it looks awesome.
Yeah, yeah, because when you and I are doing something, there's never just one motivation. You find that knife, the blacked out kukri. I mean, you find it challenging, you find it unique. It challenges you to make the lines have to be king. The design doesn't have anywhere to hide behind a bunch of busy, complicated, expensive materials.
Right.
But on the other hand, it's economically feasible. And sometimes the knife you make today makes it possible if you make the knife you're going to make tomorrow.
Right.
If we do a lot of dumb stuff today, piss away our time and money on materials or designs or whatever that just, it's too much. I say people all the time, people say, how long does it take you to make a knife? And I don't mind telling people how long my knives take.
Yeah.
But I don't make anything. Basically, I make nothing that ever takes me longer than 3 days.
Yeah.
3 days on one knife is the longest time I'll ever spend on a knife.
Exactly.
I make a lot of knives that take a lot less than that, but I don't make anything that's going to take me longer than 3 days. I know guys that spent 3 days setting up the engraving for one side of one bolster.
Yeah, I don't want to do that.
And I'm not doing that. And that's fine if they do. I admire the craftsmanship and the artistry and everything, but part of me is, I also I like that people use my knives. I didn't get into this to make things for collectibles.
Right.
I didn't. I was very surprised when Bob Dozier told me at my second knife show, he was looking at my knives, he said, you have really nice knives. He said, but I don't make collectible knives like you, I make working knives. And I said, well, mine aren't collectible knives. And he's like, well, yeah, I mean, they basically are, because I was making ABS standard knives. Everything had to have a 600 grit hand finish, and there's little mirror polished parts. And Bob's stuff was all 220 grit, bead blasted, micarta handled, and people actually skinned ear with them. And I kind of knew nobody was going to do that. And it sort of brought me back to my roots, like, gosh, I got into this to make something somebody would actually use.
Yeah.
And if I only make 3 knives a year for 50 grand a piece,
Yeah.
well, nobody's going to use those knives. But if I can make an awful lot of knives, and do a lot of people use $1,000 hunting knives? No. People will.
They will.
A lot of people shoot $1,000 rifles.
Yeah.
$10,000. People go hunt with $1,000 rifles all the time.
Yeah.
And so $300-400 knife you carry around with you? Yeah.
Well,
No problem.
the other thing that I try to educate people about is, when we talk about that, is that expensive? Well, no. What's expensive is an energy drink, that comes in an 8-ounce can and it costs $3.
Yeah, what's it?
That's expensive.
Expensive means different things to different people, but
Yeah.
expensive ought to mean more than you can afford or more than it's worth.
Yeah.
Now, if it's a Rolls Royce is not expensive if you can afford it and if you think it's worth it.
Right.
It's just a car,
It's a car.
Whereas, you spent $5 on what you just drank, right? $5 is more than some people make in a day to support a whole family. So that makes that expensive. So everybody's standards are different. I don't remember if it was Jerry Fisk or not. This is who I've heard it attributed to, but Jerry had some knives on a table at a show, and a guy came by and was looking at these knives and said, $4,000. He said, you could buy a car for $4,000. And Jerry said, well, these knives are for people who already have cars. So it's all relative. There's people, by the time, listen, if you're 18 years old and you're in high school, are you probably going to buy, I made this knife the other day, and Emmett, my son, sent a picture of it to his friend, and his friend said, I want to buy it. And I'm laughing because it's, it's like a $3,000 knife.
Yeah.
And I said, tell him I'll trade him for his Mustang. And because he doesn't need this knife, but you fast forward 20 years when he's already got a car and he's got a house and he wants it. Fine, it's not expensive anymore.
That's right. I traded a sword for a Mustang one time.
I know you did. I remember that Mustang. It was like a 80-something LX, wasn't it? 90?
It was the last year they made the Fox body. It was a 93 Fox body convertible with the 5.0.
LX.
It had 20,000 miles on it.
You had that car for a long time, didn't you?
I think I did.
Yeah, I don't remember.
5 or 6 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, the bank was like, yeah, it's worth $12,000. It's like, okay, I trade.
I'll take it.
I made him a Damascus short.
Nobody ever offered me, you and I had tables right next to each other at Blade for years, and I'd sit there, I hated you because, I could take pictures of my knives, I could put them on the internet, I could always sell them like that, but man, I go to a knife show and I just stand there and they just sit there. And your knives would be gone in the first 30 minutes, and then you just wander around the show. Yeah. And then you had this one knife, like 2 hours into the show or whatever on Friday, you hadn't sold one knife, and so you were already antsy. And so you stuck it in your belt, walked around the show, you come back like an hour later, and you're like, hey, I sold that knife. And I said, really? I said, what'd you get for it? You said, a kayak. I said, what do you mean you got a kayak? He said, hey, this guy, he had this cool kayak, and he wants to trade me a kayak for this knife. And I'm like, nobody ever does that to me. Nobody ever. I had one time, I had a guy want to trade me like a Mac 10. Do you remember that guy? You know what I'm talking about? Why can't I remember his name right off? We're not saying people's names.
Yeah,
right?
I know.
But you know what I'm talking about. He's like, I got a Mac 10 in my trunk if you want to trade it. I'm like, I don't know, man.
I traded a bunch of guns. One of the funniest things when the Smith & Wesson came out.
Yeah, I remember his name. I remember his first name right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did a car.
Is it Randy?
Randy, yeah.
Okay.
Randy.
Okay.
I would go to this little show up in Columbia. This guy, he was a big knife guy. He had guns. He was super nice, very wealthy. He had a Desert Eagle 50 Action Express, and he had a Smith & Wesson 500. And I had two big,
stupid, pointless,
knives. Yeah.
And for two big, stupid, pointless guns.
Yeah, and he goes, I'll trade you any two guns in that case. And that was like the fancy case for those two knives. And I'm like, okay, cool. It was a short-barreled 500 Smith & Wesson Magnum and the Desert Eagle. And he goes, I'll give you those in 100 rounds each. So, I kept those guns until I ran out of ammo, which didn't take long.
Right.
And then I sold those guns.
Yep.
Because those are fun.
But they're still money. I mean, it's like the guy. It's like the guy that wanted to trade you a Rolex for a knife. Fine, because the Rolex is still worth money. So you want to do that, go for it. I don't know about the kayak, but
no, the kayak was. I almost traded a guy one time a carbon fiber canoe for, and I thought it was the coolest looking thing. And then I'm really rough on stuff. He goes, yeah, but I had a stick, and I kind of broke the side in. I was like, you're talking me out of it real fast. I think I'll just stick with a plastic one. But anyway, so Burt, one of the things I usually start off with is, or we'll finish with, what's the weirdest thing you've ever seen up in the sky when you lived out west or when you moved here or whatever?
Weirdest thing?
Yeah, just interesting. Like, that's weird. That shouldn't be there.
Man, I remember seeing all kinds of stuff as a kid. We'd go camping and we'd lay on top of the camper or
out in the desert,
out in the desert or something like that, and you'd look up and you'd see, satellites and all kinds of stuff. I don't know about the weirdest thing. I just saw, we were out at the lake a couple weeks ago and we saw a satellite moving by. It was pretty cool. Yeah. I do remember, and I don't remember any of the details. I remember being a kid and seeing something. My dad and I were both driving along and saw this thing, Mojave Desert, kind of out there, and there's some light moving across the sky. We just talked about it for hours. We didn't know what it was, but I don't even remember what I saw at this point. I just remember that I saw something.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
So I always have.
Do you ask? Do you have the same story you have to tell every time?
No, I don't tell the same story. I have different ones. So I ask people these things, and Adam DeRozier's dad told me about the Kushtikov. The Kushtikov is like a shapeshifter. He looks like a human otter, like if you could imagine an otter as big as a human. He said he was coming off a boat. He got off his boat. He was coming up the beach. He said there was this guy standing up on it was a dead tree on the beach up in Alaska. Had his back turned to him. He said the guy was wearing he had like all black, like he looked like he had a wetsuit on. He goes, I got closer, and the dude had I thought it was a belt, but it had a tail. He turned around, and he had like, it looked like
I think they actually did an episode of
face.
Scooby-Doo.
No, I don't know, man, but he
Sounds
told
like
me it was, and he told me that the first time I met him. This was 2010 when I was up there for their wedding, but it's called the Kushtikov. It's and it's a shapeshifter. It'll turn in all kind of stuff. It freaked me out so bad that night. I was sleeping in the cabin. There's a bunch of other guys in there. We're heating it with heat, and I'm looking out the window, and every time I look out the window, I'm imagining that I see the Otter Man, and I'm like, oh gosh. And so when I was up there, I was living up there, wolves kept getting closer and closer to the house. This was in January or late December, early January. And you could hear them. We go, woo, make the hair stand up on the back of your neck. I never knew how close they were getting. And I stopped thinking about the Kushtikov coming to get me, and I started realizing, I'm like, you know what wolves do? They'll eat you.
Yeah,
they'll just keep coming.
They don't just look strange and walk away.
No, you can't just shoot one of them. You got to shoot half of them before they'll be like, we'll give up on this guy.
Yeah.
So the next day I went back, and there were wolf tracks from like meter to wall. And I was like, those bastards, they got really close.
Well, maybe he tried to get you afraid of something that wasn't real, this respect for something that was.
Oh boy, Alaska's a fun place like that. Very dangerous. That's why all the killer whales smile.
Yeah, that's right. Everything's food.
Well, cool. Hey, brother, thanks for being on here.
Yeah.
I had fun.
Thank you.
This was episode 397.
We've actually had more than one episode then in this recording.
Yeah.
30 episodes, I think,
Yeah.
in this recording.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot in it. I think you should split it up into a lot of
people's attention spans are as short as mine. We had to put it in about 3 minute
increments. And also, there's nothing that we said that's worth listening to for more than 3 minutes at a time. So
yes, it is. People love this. Well, I do anyway.
Hey,
Burt, can you give your website?
Yeah, it's really complicated. It's Burt Foster.
BurtFoster.com.
Or just Burt Foster
If
on
you
Google.
would-
There's only 3 Burt Fosters in America, so yeah.
Burt has a cool knife shirt. I wish you'd have wore it.
Oh,
He had a picture. It's a drawing of a
my
really
knife-
cool
the
knife.
my
It's
knife
like
and
my
your
knife and your knife.
yeah.
So BurtFoster.com. Follow Burt on Instagram. Same thing, just Burt Foster.
Burt, maybe something.
If he posts
Underscore
anything on
something.
there.
Yeah, I sometimes do.
And it is an opportunity. Sometimes you do post knives up for sale on there, but they usually go in about 5 seconds.
On the website.
Yeah, on the
Oh,
website.
yeah. That's kind of my foundation of my business is my website.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yep.
Very cool. Well, thanks for watching. If you haven't hit the subscribe button, do so. You should have done it before. Anyway, have a great day and leave an intelligent comment. Bye. Oh, points to me.
Uh-oh. So, yeah, you said hour and a quarter. What was that? That was hour and a half.